Hello, my name's Adam Kranitz. I'm with Resilio, and we're delighted to be a first-time sponsor at the NAB show. And along with that, we are amazingly excited to have three really impressive people join us on the Connect Zone Theater stage here at the NAB show in the West Hall. And let me do some quick introductions. We're going to do a roundtable style panel presentation, pick their brains about how they connect the world of creative and technology to fuel global creative content. But let me get started. Starting from my left, we have Danny Yoon. Danny is the creative director and partner at VFX and Post House. Mr. Wolf, welcome, Danny.
Thanks for having me here.
And tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll move down the line.
In 2005, I started this company as basically a one-man shop with in-house at Motion Theory, and they're like a design and commercial studio and also did music videos and stuff like that. I also brought in my existing TV clients, and so I was doing VFX for them. And then since then, like in 2011, we amicably broke up, and then I started my own shop on my own, and then kind of rode the TV episodic streaming wave, and slowly over time we built up the TV effects side. We still do commercials, we kind of, and editorial on a certain level, and also we've expanded to Vancouver, New York, and Atlanta in addition to LA.
Great. Thank you, Danny, for being here. Next up, Alan McSweeney is a partner at Praymaker. Praymaker bills themselves as a creative and technology company, so I want to dig into that a little bit more in this presentation. Alan, tell us a little bit more about your background.
So I started with Praymaker during COVID, actually, which is when the company began. Company started 2 weeks before COVID lockdown, so interesting timing. So I joined them maybe just a handful of months right after they began. And we started as a fully cloud-based studio, creative content studio, doing mostly short-form content, a lot for the advertising and commercial world, some short film. We've developed a lot of our own tech and IP. And, we're gradually building, and now we've gone kind of in a multi-region model, which is brings a bunch of challenges. The company's starting to grow. We have people working all over the world. We're trying to focus the talent that we build in particular zones so we can essentially build a studio or a brick and mortar office in particular places.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Christian Botha. Christian is a head of technology at Sunrise Productions, which is a animation studio that actually creates their own IP projects, for particularly in the children's entertainment, well known for Jungle Beats. So, Christian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Adam. Lovely being here. So I joined Sunrise about 5 years ago. I have a computer science background. Joined the company when we were about 45 people spread across a couple of offices, and over the course of the last 5 years, kind of grown with them as we've gone from a small indie studio based in Cape Town, South Africa, to now working on a show with over 240 people in 24 countries spread around the planet. So it's been an incredible experience growing with the company as the ambitions and just the scale of the projects have grown.
Awesome. I appreciate all three of you guys joining us. So I'm going to hit you with the first question. All right. Creative teams are well known for having big ideas, right? But even bigger files. Sometimes our infrastructure for the post facilities that you guys run aren't able to scale to quite meet the demands of those awe-inspiring ideas that the creative team has. So I'd like to hear an example from each of you guys. Maybe we'll start with Christian on the end of how you facilitated with your infrastructure having no creative limits, in terms of what we do, how many files we create, where we are in the world, getting access to the world's greatest creative talent. How does IT support that?
Yeah, so the perfect example of this was about 2 years ago, the owners of the company came to me saying that they wanted to expand. They had funding on a project that would require talent that would basically go beyond the resource pool within South Africa. There's only so many artists, and the level and the quality they wanted meant to go international. And we explored all of the various options of setting up studios around the world, etc. And what we settled on was actually keeping our main location in Cape Town, but virtualizing studios in the cloud. So we used AWS to virtualize the studios with workstations. And there were a whole bunch of tertiary benefits to doing it that way. You can access talent from anywhere. So like from an IT standpoint, setting up Office with file servers and all your networking, the power backups, the actual cost of rent, it's a giant CapEx expenditure. And our owners prefer to be an OpEx, and being able to, hey, we want to spin up 20 artists in India in the next month. How do we do that? Being able to virtualize on the cloud, go that way. It is a challenge. But yeah, the sheer amount of data that we sync around is very significant. As our ambitions grow, file sizes grow, number of files go. So we're currently sitting at like 45 million files on active sync, pushing 3 petabytes of storage globally. It's a significant amount of work.
Okay. Alan, same question for you. How have you built infrastructure that supports no creative limitations?
Well, starting natively in AWS, afforded us similar flexibility. Being able to, scale out and then more importantly scale back in when you don't need it was a huge help. But then being able to provision resources in multiple different regions and easily network them all is a big advantage in the cloud, right? Trying to do that when you're running bare metal and contracting fiber providers, and which usually involves long-term contracts. And then sometimes those contracts have locked you in a particular bandwidth, and to try and increase it requires a whole new it gets very complicated. So the flexibility of the working in the cloud has given us, has allowed us to spin up resources. We typically concentrate in North Virginia, but we have stuff in Los Angeles, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, Cape Town, London, Frankfurt. I mean, it's so easy to bring up what you need, where you need it. But that also introduces other challenges, right? When you have everybody working in a single network or within a single local network, your storage and your compute all being close to each other, very easy to manage. As soon as you start spreading it out a bit further, introduces some new problems. But the premise that you can bring up what you need where you need it is really the key.
But, so I'm going to put a pin in that. I really want to talk more about putting resources near people. Danny, what's your perspective on creating the right infrastructure to support creativity?
So we had the challenge of we had 4 existing offices and a significant investment in equipment and on-prem. So we had that we had that problem of how do we literally sync and coordinate all the offices, because we all work on the same projects as a studio as a whole. So that's where Resilio Sync helped us basically virtualize our file system into one same structure, directory structure files, and then and also we are looking towards co-location and making our own private cloud, and also exploring AWS and stuff like that. But for us, it's always been the cost benefit analysis for us, and also incorporating. The tricky part was incorporating what we already had built, into that scenario. But what Resilio enables us to do is you can actually consolidate all that with the same file system.
You were literally reading my mind. So let's talk about cost benefit analysis. You guys are describing some, not insignificant investments in terms of cloud services, fiber, storage. How are you making the business case study in your organization that we need to make the investment in this? Is it man hours saved? What metric do you use to say this is why we need to we need to fiscally budget for this year?
So I'll jump in on that. So in the animation industry, by far your biggest expense is just labor. It's about 2/3 of the cost is just pure in labor, and then pretty much the rest of it's mostly in tech. So especially at a scale of a couple of hundred people, an hour a week is not an insignificant amount of money. It comes out to literal thousands of dollars. So if you take it over the lifetime of a project, having that, okay, we need to spin up a new region to decrease the latency for these artists. If they can produce an extra half a shot every 2 weeks over the course of a movie, and like a project that runs 2 to 5 years long, the cost savings on that is significant. And it's a pretty easy sum to do and justify the investment.
Guys, any other thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, when you want to expand to a global workforce, stretching that workforce out requires latency somewhere, and you have to find the best place that's going to live within the workflow and within the tool set. One tool that we use that helps us a lot to reach quite far is HP Anywhere, PCYP. So this allows artists all around the world to connect up to, let's say, 100 milliseconds of latency away, and get in a workstation and actually be able to do some pretty good work. Once you get beyond that, now you start to get this lazy cursor kind of behavior where artists are trying to work and the cursor's somewhere a couple of seconds behind where they were actually drawing. It's, becomes very difficult. So actually moving the latency in a place that is not in the interface for the artist and actually sits maybe between two different file storage systems, then they don't feel it so much. So you're still going to wait somewhere, but where is the right place to put that depending on the distance that you're trying to reach is really important. What Resilio is allowing us to do now is actually give artists a very performant experience and then move files across a wide area very, very efficiently.
Now, so we're talking about, in the artist case, it's not so much just waiting for files to transfer or renders to complete. You're talking about like the performance of the creative application is just butter smooth. It's seamless. And you can only accomplish that by doing that, the infrastructure planning ahead of time.
Yeah. So if we have, Cape Town being a location that we use artists in as well, there's incredible talent in that country. We can have someone trying to work on a virtual workstation in AWS based in North Virginia, and there's more than 250 milliseconds of latency in their interface. So switching them to using compute in AWS Cape Town instead drops that down to 3 milliseconds of latency in their interface. But now you have to move all the correct files back and forwards, and coming up with really good strategies for moving just the right files at the right time and just the correct amount of files becomes the problem to solve.
Is that a scalability problem? Are you thinking, when you're making these investments and these decisions, are you thinking about, I may need to double my capacity 6 months from now based on projects that are coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, you need to be able to make sure that the pipe is large enough for the data that you're trying to move. You have to make sure that the storage infrastructure you're presenting can scale with the number of artists that are going to be using it at any given point. Are you scaling up render? So if we're bringing up large distributed compute render in that location, can it handle the IOPS? Can it take what we're going to throw at it? So something that can also scale horizontally is quite necessary. but really getting this transport between locations. So we keep all of our primary storage in North Virginia. So let's call that the authority. And then really caching data out to edge regions in an effective manner, just allows us to go anywhere in the world, like tap any talent anywhere in the world.
Okay, so now, again, reading my mind. So you've now solved for latency, you've solved for scalability. What possibilities does that open up for you guys for getting the best creative talent? Is that central to your business? I need to work with a VFX finishing artist in Cape Town, or can I, is it more important for me for that person to be located, near my facility?
Yeah, well, to get back to your point about productivity, when we have an artist who's working in Cape Town with 256 milliseconds of latency, at best, their productivity is a quarter in a day of what they would do when we give them local compute or much closer compute. But actually, there's certain tasks and certain disciplines that absolutely cannot work with that level of latency. Things like doing paint or sculpture, modeling. These things require incredible levels of control and detail for the artist. So there has to be basically no latency for them to be able to work. So if we want people to be able to do that in edge regions, we need the compute right close to the artist.
Danny, if you were to start over from scratch, building up a series of post facilities, would you do anything different than what you have today? Would you start it different if you're starting today in the process?
So you highlighted an issue that basically that's our hesitancy in jumping full into the cloud, and being kind of like 100% virtual studio. And it is still that need for interactivity. And so, and also depending on the artist, like, one artist is fine with remoting in, and another artist insists they want to work on their machine with synced files. And so with Resilio, you can actually accommodate that, because you have two modes. You can sync the servers and the NASes together, or now I'm learning that geography in the cloud is actually important. And so you guys are syncing on your edges, right? And then you have the desktop mode where you have the ability to sync selective folders of a project or whatever they're actually working on the artist's workstation at home. And then as they render, that render goes back to home base, and updates. And so, I think also for compositing and conforming editorial, that latency is even more important for us. So it's hard to kind of go ahead. Also, you get more efficiencies if your studio is all virtual, then yeah, you get a lot of efficiencies that way for being in the cloud. But being hybrid, has its challenges.
Yeah, I mean, editorial is definitely a process that is so timing sensitive. The whole thing is timing.
Sound sync.
Yeah, and latency is an absolute killer for those people. Yeah, I agree.
Just to expand on your point, so we do both. We sync our regional studios, and then we also have various artists that we sync to their workstation with selective sync. A perfect example is we brought on a modeler who's been in animation for 25 years, went from drawing on a piece of paper all the way through, and they have a very specific workflow with softwares that we don't usually standardize within the studio. But then the thing is, oh, sure, here's the files on your computer, drop them in this folder, that comes back into our pipeline and can be picked up perfectly normally. So yeah, it is kind of things. Certain use cases, we call it in pipelines, we have kind of a cutoff of when we allow that. But as soon as you're if you're outside of that and you have a specific tool or a little script that you wrote yourself that you want to use, we can just give them the files on their computer, work on it, and then distribute it out to the rest of the artists.
And also for us, we have to see the pixel per pixel. So another thing that we're hesitant to kind of give up is approving shots, approving tasks through remote desktop streaming. It's getting there, but to be able to play it back in real time and see all the little nuances of the shot and artifacts and whatnot, you really need to have it sync on-prem in front of your computer and review it for the final QC.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there are compromises in moving to a remote or a cloud workflow that bring flexibility, but they bring other challenges. And us being able to use a tool like Resilio for shunting data around within a fully cloud environment is one use case, but then being able to actually use something that can deliver files between that cloud and back to on-prem for a hybrid workflow is a quality that this brings that's very hard to do without a tool that can properly cover a wide area network and not fall off with performance as the distance increases.
So what you guys are saying is on-premise or data centers are here to stay in the post-production process, and the flight to all cloud may be a bit premature?
It's, case by case. But, yesterday Blackmagic released a 12K camera. So the data just keeps on getting bigger and bigger. And it's just then the cost of storing that in the cloud, it's
about being efficient.
Yeah, our NAS is already paid off, so we want to use it, and that's
Wasn't that part of it is really leveraging the infrastructure you have in place today, right? Getting more investment out of it, capital investment out of it.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the answer. Do you prefer OpEx? Do you prefer CapEx? Do you have existing infrastructure that you still need to utilize because it's only a year old? And to your point, the cloud is just a data center that you don't own. You're renting it. So it's what's your forecast on your financials? Can you take a 10-year outlook on something? Can you only take a 2-year outlook on something? I think that's kind of where that question has to be answered.
I think also that we try and all be as flexible as possible and up to date and ready to switch out one solution for the other whenever there's a new tool or something fantastic that we want to adopt. But one thing that we all know is that choosing storage carefully in the first place it's not something you want to change out very often. It's a big lift to move from one storage platform to another or one NAS provider to another. It's just not easy. So getting that right in the first place is really important. Being able to then extend that out in a place where you can work with more than one provider in multiple different regions and having something that is agnostic to the storage provider on the other end is quite compelling. And Resilio has given us that level of agnosticism that is really good.
Chris, you come from a computer sciences background, IT background, and are working in the creative industry. Does the creative industry, by definition, need more focus on information technology, computer science engineering, data management? Is it becoming truly too technical, right? How do we get the right talent to support this global creative pipeline?
The animation, the VFX industry is already very technical. In essence, at its core, you're simulating the real world in some way or other, in creative ways and non-creative ways. As the software develops, it gets more complex. It's harder for artists to use at its core. But there's usually a point where, even though the back end is extremely complex, the artist workflow starts simplifying. And whether that's in-house, we have entire pipeline teams that develop tools to literally make a multi-step process into a click of a button on the back end. And the reason for that is purely to have the creatives create. It's that's something we try and do internally is we don't want them wasting time saving out files to a specific location or doing this cleanup step. If we can go build a tool with developers and with like external vendors where they don't have to do that and they can just focus on creating. We can deliver a better product. We can deliver products faster. Yeah.
Amazing. Guys, what do you think? When you got into this business, did you think you would be so focused on managing infrastructure?
No, and I didn't really want to do that. But as an owner, I was forced to. And it was when we were moving from Culver to El Segundo within LA. I was kind of in charge of the move, and to be able to we couldn't move in one day, literally. We had to maintain, both facilities and, literally sneakernet jobs over, but then that wasn't enough. You had to keep those 2 copies up to date. And I tried, several solutions and they kind of worked, but like one solution, I would try to have it sync every hour, but it would take an hour to index it because we have millions of files for a job. And so that was unacceptable. And luckily I found you guys, and that made our move, seamless, and it saved us. But then I realized, oh wait, this is a larger thing than that. It can unify the whole or all our location. And that was one of those moments serendipitous moment that happened.
Alan, how about you? Did you envision that you'd be this deep in the weeds, so to speak, on the technical side of the process?
I mean, I was hoping so, actually. I mean, I love it. I got into what we do on the technology side within, creative studios because it is so challenging and you are constantly pushing the boundaries of what you can do with computers. Sometimes we're not saving lives, but sometimes it feels like you're trying to get rockets to the moon. It gets very, very complicated. And it's incredibly challenging and incredibly satisfying when you can have these genius talent people just sit down and get on with what they do and make all of the problems with technology get out of their way. This is the crux of what you got earlier there. The cost of the labor, the cost of the talent is the majority of your outlay. And so you want to allow these people to just get on with their work, and any single step, any second in the day that is a process that you could take out of the way for them, then that's the goal. Just let them go from point to point in time, task to task, being great at what they do, and everything else, just get it out of their way. So worrying about, for example, which path should I be saving a file to? Like, we try and take these things away using media asset managers. They don't even have to think about that. But then similarly, moving files from one location to another, you need to come up with good strategies to understand which file a person is going to need before they even know they need it, right? So, for example, a task might be assigned to somebody in our edge region. So then we will go to great trouble to figure out every single file that is needed for this person to do this task, and every dependent file, put that together as a list and start pushing it using Resilio to their location before they've even realized they've been assigned the task. So by the time they actually open up and get to work, it's already there. It feels local to them. So having strategies for all of these preemptive methods of hydrating files for people is a game changer for us.
But, yeah, it's almost AI-like in that it's seamlessness. What about automation? Like, how important is it you talked a little bit about it, but how important is it to automate the steps of data movement, right?
The business wouldn't work without it. You'd literally spend days just trying to figure out what you need to move. It's just, yeah.
So give us an example, Chris. What would be like an automation that you'd set up?
So, for example, we, pre-COVID pretty much, if you wanted a global studio, you'd usually, centralize a department around a region. You would do lighting in LA and you'd do animation in India if you did want a global studio. we have all of our departments literally anywhere on the planet. And that means that and this is an example, our cinematographer who's part of the lighting team sits in LA, but the majority of our lighting team sits in Cape Town. And they ask him, hey, like on publish, they're like, hey, can you quickly open this shot? All of the publishing steps, the kickoff to render, all of that stuff's automated, syncing to him so that he can literally jump on a call with him and be like, hey, can we change this? Can we change that? And then just the iterative process of doing that over and over and over again across like hundreds of shots and sequences, across the length of the project. It's crucial.
Yeah. I mean, multidisciplinary, studios where you cover many different creative disciplines have different data sets, but essentially people are doing one part of the process, outputting a result, and then have to hand it off to somebody else, and it keeps going all the way down until you eventually have a finished thing. So it means keeping one large, well-maintained namespace of files a necessity in our industry. So you said you're up to what, 75 million files, right, Mother?
So we're currently syncing 45 million files. If I include archive, it's probably pushing 100 million files in total. It's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we're sitting at around 25 million files, probably about half a petabyte of data. And we're a small studio, so it gets unmanageably large. So trying to make sure that you get the right files to the right people is extremely difficult, and you may only get that right, let's say, 99% of the time. But 1% of files missing could put a massive delay in the process. So with Resilio, we can actually take 100% of the files in the namespace and make all of them available to every person globally. So we can hydrate the files we think they need, but they can still see the files that we missed right there. They just click on it, they read it, literally just read the file, and it will start transferring by itself. So we can do a best guess at getting all the files there. We don't get it completely right, it's not the end of the world. And that cuts down a huge amount of development work that we have to do, because getting 100% of the files right every time is, an exponentially harder problem to solve. So it's very helpful.
When you think about, let's say, the next 6 to 9 months, what are you going to change in your infrastructure setup? What do you have your site set on next? Is it more storage, less storage, more regions, less regions? What are you guys planning for next?
So we're actually busy looking into doing a complete overhaul of our storage and networking solution on site. That kind of just comes from, we've hit our cap with our current infrastructure. We're kind of running out of storage space, networking starting to get bottlenecked, and that's purely because our compute in office has just scaled significantly. And we are bringing out a lot of archive projects back into live production. And the way we're currently managing our servers and our storage isn't conducive to take a project from 2018 that we did for someone and they want to make a season 2 of it, bringing out all of those assets into our quote-unquote fast servers. So it's like we're looking at moving to software-defined storage so we can unify all of our storage solutions and just kind of increasing the capacity of everything.
Really interested in that notion of the pulling archive back pretty instantaneously. I mean, years ago we would have talked about maybe tape storage or something like that, or cold storage, and then you'd have to have somebody pull it and reconnect the hard drives. How much is that enabling your revenue growth as a studio to be able to just bring a project right back and start up again?
It's quite crucial. So animation takes an extremely long time and is hyper dependent on each department. So every person is dependent on someone before them doing their job. So when you're planning out a multi-year project, if there's any delays, it has a significant shift in a timeline. So oftentimes you sit with a scenario where people can sit idle, for a certain amount of time. And if you can go and find smaller projects to kind of fill in those times where the artists aren't working because they're waiting for work with other jobs, it's extremely crucial. So like, we might run into that situation where we have certain departments idle, and like then we can go pull out these things, negotiate contracts with people, and just bring them up and keep them working.
What about for you guys? What do you do for your archive solution? And any change to your current workflow?
Well, we have like a secondary RAID, basically the old RAIDs that we had before. So then we can automate that process of like doing a one-way sync, and then eventually they go to tape, So, but having that kind of like the pre-archive tier and
nearline, I guess, to some degree.
It's a nearline, and being able to like in an emergency case, we don't necessarily have to go back to an old project like older than like 5 years, right? But a TV season might come back, right? So then you might need files for that. So then it's always there, right? And then inherently, the other nodes are a current backup for the current projects offsite, which is like a really important, requirement with the studios and their security audits and stuff like that. So, each city is a backup of each other.
Okay. So, do we have any questions in the audience at this point? Anyone want to ask a question for Alan, Danny, or Christian? Yeah? Okay, we'll keep going I think we got a couple more minutes, guys. Right? All right. So we've talked about scalability. We've talked about access to creative talent. We've talked about archiving. We've talked about a little bit about the future. Guys, you're each very successful in running a business and, driving maximum revenue out of it. How do you also keep your employees happy and productive? So business side aside, what's the key to keeping creative talent productive and happy? We talked a little bit about, making sure the creative tools are responsive, but it's more than that, right?
Great coffee.
I could use some of that right now.
Virtual coffee?
Coffee on demand.
Yeah, honestly, from what I found is creatives love what they do. They want to do it all day, every day. They do not want to get caught up doing admin they don't want to do. They don't want to get caught up doing other stuff. And that's often what leaves a sour taste in people's mouths, is when they get caught up in things they just don't want to do. And that can be meetings. It can be too many meetings. It can be that. But a big part of it is they don't want their workflow to be interrupted at any point. And it's a very rewarding fact about working in tech and in the creative industries. If you do your job well, they're happy because they can do what they love to do. They don't have to sit around moving files or doing these menial tasks. And yeah, I think it just boils down to creatives are there because they love it. They wouldn't be if they didn't. And just removing any bottlenecks, any headaches from their life to just let them do that.
And giving them agency to choose what they want to do. What happens in a bigger facility is like you might get pigeonholed, and they'll be like, this guy's really good at removing reflections. And then you realize, and then you pile
the reflections guy.
Yeah, or like, they just like driving comps, right? Like, someone's driving and it's a fake road behind. And then you pile on like a bunch of shots and they're cranking through them. And then later, they'll just say, I hate doing this. And you're like, oh, we didn't know. We can give you a break. You could do something else. And it's all about communication. But artists, they're really bad at like speaking up for themselves. And they are just in their world of like, I like doing this. And then you really have to kind of get out of them like, are you happy? What do you want to do? And how do you want to grow? And giving them that agency is really important.
Yeah, also, removing menial tasks out of their process as much as possible. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter who we are or what we're doing. Generally, menial tasks are things that we would like to eliminate, and then just go on with the fun bits. And there's so much fun and joy in creative people's process and just making great content. It's really satisfying for those people. So just cut out all the bad bits and life will be good.
Cutting out the bad bits. I like that's a good tagline for any nonlinear video editor. So kind of last question to wrap it up. What is the future of running a growing studio? Where are you going to find, you've got access to global creative talent all over the world. You've got the infrastructure that's going to support the automation of assets and files being moved all over the place. All that's good to go. What's next for you guys? Where do you find your growth?
I mean, for us, we already touched on automations are necessary just for the business to work. But then more of those menial tasks, we can start using more AI, more ML to reduce the number of them. We're not necessarily looking to replace creative output using these tools. What we're trying to do is allow the person to focus on the creative bits more and then just grease the wheel with tools like AI to be able to allow the person to, again, move on to their next creative step faster, better. The amount of work that we now create in the same amount of time pretty much increases by 2 or 3 times every 5 years. We get maybe after a 5-year period, you're given a third of the amount of time that you used to do the same amount of work. And then the same again, the next 5 years. And it just keeps compressing and compounding. So you really need to help these people not get crushed. So just making it so efficient, and allow them to enjoy that process without stress,
So in other words, deadlines never move. Deadlines are the deadlines. You just got to find a way to make it happen within that time frame.
100%. And the start date is getting a lot closer to the end date all the time.
Danny, what are your thoughts? What's next for you guys?
I share the same, I don't know if you call it optimism, but of the, next generation of AI and ML tools that, they will take the drudgery out of it, but also, accelerate, being able to deliver something on time. But then it's, it enables artists to concentrate on, the really cool tasks, and take the drudgery out of all that. And then for our future, we're going to try to, expand with the co-location. And, for us, that's our comfort zone, is to be able to have control of, those resources. And then it enables us to kind of like have, the facility grow as a whole without, building up, the on-prem, stuff, because we're running out of space and power and all that in the actual office too.
Time to expand. So I would encourage you, if you're watching this right now, to check out the amazing work that our speakers are doing with their teams right now. MrWolf.com, Praymaker.com, and SunriseProductions.tv. And of course, check out Resilio.com as well. If there's anything we can do to support your growth and your creative inspiration and connecting your global creatives around the world to get your best work done, we're happy to help. And I thank everybody for watching, and I thank you guys for joining us today at the NAB show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Great job, guys.